From vintage tones to the modern day best. From cheap pawn shop finds to dream rigs. This is Guitar Gab, the podcast where everything six-string rules the conversation. Hosted by Dan Goettel and Bigsby Shims. We're talking gear, pedals, pickups, amps, playing, collecting, tone chasing, guitar legends, and all the stories in between. Whether you're a bedroom player, touring musician, weekend jammer, or a full-on gear addict, pull up a chair, plug in, and turn it up. This is Guitar Gab.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Guitar Gab. I am Dan Goettel. I'm here with Bigsby Shims.
Hey, everybody.
And we are back. We are back to spend a little bit of our day and your day talking about gear. Today, we are going to venture down the rabbit hole of delay. But first, as listeners may remember, we basically talked ourselves into buying gear on the first episode. And now there's a bit of an update on that pedal that you scored, Biggs.
We got to bring it back to the DoD phaser. This one happens to be from 1979, according to the pot code.
Nice.
And I learned something this week that I've been curious about for a long time. These pedals do suck a little bit of tone, so I was going to go in and just change out to a true bypass switch in there. And I've been hearing, if you look at Analog Man, he'll say that recapping an old pedal, at least in his older literature, you really don't get much out of it because the pedals are such low voltage. It's not really stressing those components too much. But a couple of guys that I follow that I respect, some techs, they say that the electrolyte inside those capacitors, which are rated for about maybe 10, 15 years, that stuff can dry out, especially for a pedal that's, I think, going on about 47 years old, I think, something like that. So I figured, what the hell, I'll pull out these two electrolytic caps that are in the power section, I believe, of the pedal, and just put some fresh ones in there, some high quality ones.
As you do.
And just see what happens. And if it sounds worse, I'll just put the other ones back. So I put them in there, and man, it was like taking a blanket off. It sounded really good before, but it really transformed in a way that I can only describe as it sounds like it just came from the store.
That's great.
I guess you could say it has more presence, but overall, everything just went up a notch as far as the tone, the sound.
This brings up a point. Now, so you did this for a couple of things for me, but I remember specifically I had an old Boss EQ, one of those, Boss
G7.
Graphic EQs, the GE7, yeah. And you're just like, yeah, I can just replace a few things. It'll sound better. It'll work better. Don't remember, I guess the Boss isn't.
True bypass.
Yeah, you can't true. But either way, there was a noticeable difference. So for those people out there that are sort of curious and they have their pedals and they've got some old vintage pedals, would you suggest having somebody go in there and clean it up, or is it just pedal to pedal, or is it everything that could benefit from it?
I guess it would kind of go along the same lines of any sort of, if it falls under collectible.
Got it.
Okay. So I'm assuming if you're lucky enough to have a 54 Strat, you probably don't want to start switching out caps and pots in that thing. It's
Totally
sort of
makes
a different category at that point,
Yeah, for sure.
But if you have a 54 Strat that's beat to hell and is a player guitar and has already had that stuff, then I think all bets are off and you can do that stuff. For me, I like to start with my bass tone of guitar into amp, and it sounds great, and I'm loving it. And then everything I put in the middle, I don't really want it to change that unless I want it to change that, if you know what I mean.
Got it.
So
yeah.
I'm always really wary, and we're going to talk about delays today, and that's one of the things for delay for me is I love delay. What I don't love about delay is that it changes your bass tone underneath the repeats.
Yeah,
so I want my guitar to stay the same and then just have that cool echo on top of it.
Which is odd, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but I actually kind of like the sort of realistic change in the delay sound as it repeats and goes on. Famously, I picked one today that we can dive into that. Before we start, I wanted to ask a question about delay that I knew you could answer, and I wanted you to just talk a little bit about the difference between digital delay and analog delay.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I mean, my experience with that stuff, it was really kind of the first delays that I heard, and I guess growing up in the 80s or whatever, was the Boss DD, was it the DD2
DD1 or
DD2?
Yeah,
the white one with the blue text on it. So that was my first experience, and for me, that was always more of an echo.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, hey, here's your sound, and it's playing back,
Sure.
sort of like just repeat, and you could do that funky press and hold thing, which was super cool. So I always thought of delay more of that kind of an effect. And it wasn't until a few years late, and I sort of avoided it because it wasn't something I was looking for. Of I want my sound coming back at me, and it wasn't until later that I realized, and I guess this can bring us into a little bit of what we're talking about today, which was my first pick.
Okay,
was my first personal discovery of a delay pedal that got me into it. Was in the mid to late '90s. The Ibanez Soundtank series.
Oh, yeah.
And I went into this shop. It's still there, Guitar Bar in Hoboken, New Jersey. James is fantastic.
Nice.
Shout out for him. And they had a brand new Ibanez Soundtank Echo Machine EM5.
Okay.
Never heard of it, plugged into it, and it did something. It wasn't just repeating. It did this sort of smeary thing to the sound that you could play chords. You could leave it on all the time. It just had this cool, for some reason it reminded me of Neil Young.
Okay.
I don't know why. I don't think Neil Young even uses delay.
No, I think he famously plugs directly into one of those old tube Fender reverb units and just cranks the piss out of it, right?
Yeah, but it added this grit that I really found compelling.
Okay.
And I had to buy it. And then, fast forward now to today's age, I think a pedal board builder in LA that does a lot of big rigs, he started putting that on people's boards. And this EM5, long gone for me, has now come back in favor. We're I think even at some point, stores were blowing them out for $29,
Sure.
So now it's on Doyle Bramhall's pedal board.
Okay.
And they've definitely gone up in price. So that would be my intro, my first pick. And I guess the funny thing about that, and going back to your question, is that that's a digital delay pedal that's emulating analog delay.
Well, I think you get a lot of that. I think that does exist, right?
Yep.
The digital, what do they call it? Digital modeling?
Sure. Especially nowadays. Yep.
Yeah. And just to really quick stick on that for a bit. So is that the type of pedal, an older pedal like that you would grab? And does it sound better to you because it is a little older, because it is a little easier technology? Do you think that makes the delay sound a little different than some of the more bits, more chips, whatever you get in the more digital delay? So it's a digital delay, but it's not too digital. I'm wondering, is that?
From what I've heard, it's a digital delay, and they have a DL5 as well. And I think the main difference between that and the DL5 is that the EM5, the Echo Machine, it seems like they have sort of a tube screamer distortion type of thing, a little that dirties up that very clean repeat.
Okay.
And again, if I'm not mistaken, I think the chip they used in those is the chip that was in a karaoke machine. So you know how the karaoke machines have those really terrible effects?
Yeah.
So they kind of used that to their advantage and said, hey, this thing doesn't sound great, but to simulate one of those sort of older, grittier analog bucket brigade chips, as we know.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about that later. I'll get to that too later.
Yeah. So I think if you're a person that is not a fan of that digital delay sound, and maybe you don't want all the quirks of the analog delay,
yeah, sure,
then something like this or those simulations that we have now are a nice middle ground of the two.
When I was looking and I was trying to find out where I was going to start, man, there are all kinds of ways you can go with delay now, right? Again, as you said, Bucket Brigade, there are people that want to get that digital, that Strymon has that dig, which is just trying to get all the old digital stuff back out there.
Yep.
They have plenty of great analog delays or ones that are trying to still do that original analog sound even better. I kind of went, you're going to laugh after what you just said too. I started and I thought, well, what was my first delay pedal that I had? What have I seen on more boards in my life? What have I seen more people use? And it was the Boss DD3 is what I picked because that's what I had at first. But the DD3 at first was just a basic copy of the DD2 with that big long chip in there that they took out of their flagship delay until they ran out of those chips. Allegedly, I've never done this, but allegedly the DD2s and the early DD3s sound a little different than the later production DD3s.
Okay.
But, you know, for $100 delay, it could, I think it had 500 milliseconds of delay on the longest setting. You could set it on the board. It was really easy to use, right? It had the 3 different levels, short, medium, and long delay. You had your depth and your feedback, your level, and you could dial it in. And I thought it was really, really, really great at the end of it to be able to have that at the end of your pedal board, the last thing, and have some thickening delay. I don't use delay all that much. So that was the first I had. It was the easiest. It stayed there for a long time.
And you could buy it anywhere.
anywhere. They're built like a tank a little bit. They can handle a lot of stuff. They're out everywhere. If you're looking for a delay, if your buddy has one and you don't have one, you can dial whatever you want in on the same thing. It just seemed like the workman's delay. So I was like, this is a thing. I certainly didn't choose it for the sound of the delay. I've never really even compared it too much. It was just more the ease of that delay and the fact that it was clean and the fact that it was clean and it could repeat a long time. I do think it sounds a little cold, but that's just more on the modulation part, which it doesn't do really. And I think as I progress into the stuff I ended up liking more, that became more of a thing. When I first started working in music, we had like a bunch of these old tape delay machines in the back that nobody wanted to fix because nobody wanted to deal with the tape. And what people forgot was the machine itself and the technology behind it was pretty badass. Like it did some cool stuff for the sound, including the input. But when I was first starting, man, it was just about getting this thing that's clean and quiet and runs. And that's what the DD series was, DD2s and 3s.
And easy to throw in a gig bag. And I have to say, since you mentioned the Boss, the first thing I thought of was, I don't think I've ever seen a broken Boss pedal. I mean, ever.
I know. They were pretty much a workman pedal, right? I mean, maybe I might have had like an old 3-knob chorus pedal that the knob couldn't turn anymore, like that was stripped. But that was just, you're turning it so much and playing with it, whatever. But it's, the pedal itself was always working. You step on it, it comes on. So
yeah, I mean, those are ubiquitous for a reason because they look cool.
Yeah.
It's almost the standard pedal is a Boss pedal. That's where you start.
When I was going through all of this stuff, the first thing that popped in my head is you kept saying they don't necessarily have to be the best, but it's some of our faves, what we like. And that is definitely something, you see it. And listen, the farther you go down the line, most people kind of graduate from that and find a delay that they like a little better, that also doesn't take up too much space and they can set it however they set it. But I would bet 80% of guitarists that have played a delay have played that delay, maybe 90.
And probably their first delay too.
Yeah, I think so.
My journey starting after that digital emulating analog took me back to, well, then what does a real analog delay sound like? So for me, that was the next thing that I went after. And I ended up, at the time, Maxon was being distributed in the US. They had come out and they had the Maxon AD-900.
Is it purple colored?
It's like a pinkish red, kind of like all those Maxon delays. So that same thing, but it was a bigger enclosure.
All right.
Still a 3-knob thing, but it sounded great. It had, it might have been like 500 milliseconds of delay or something on that, which was pretty good for analog delay.
I was about to say, at the time, the probably was great.
But it ran, I believe, off of 12 volts at the time, where pedal powers didn't really have that sort of thing. So it had a wall wart, which is kind of annoying on the pedal board. And then shortly thereafter, they came out, because I believe that pedal had some of those original Bucket Brigade chips.
Okay.
And then as that supply was dwindling, Maxon, they had enough juice that they developed their own Bucket Brigade chip from scratch.
Okay.
And they came out with the AD-999. So now this one had 900 milliseconds of delay. It ran off a standard 9-volt supply.
Okay.
And it did sound a little bit different, but I said, well, I got to get rid of this 900. I want this thing on my board. It was just a much easier thing all around.
So can you talk for a second about the Bucket Brigade chips themselves? Because there's plenty of makers now that make their version of that, probably not with original Bucket Brigade chips, but it's more of a thing, right? It's what these chips do to the sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost kind of like it's recording the sound and playing it back. That's what they do. And a couple of the chips that are defunct, they're being made again.
Oh, okay.
I think the company's maybe called Cool Audio, but they are remaking some of those. I'm not sure if they're exactly, one-to-one copies, but it's the same technology.
And what it does to the delay, isn't it? The EQing or the high and low sound is a little more pronounced in those echoes, right? In those delays?
I think what it comes down to is that those chips, they, depending on how far you push the envelope of how long the delay is, there's a degradation that happens. And I think there is some artifacts, which then a big part of those circuits is there's a filtering, as far as I understand, there's a filtering section that comes after it. And that filter is what dictates how much of that high end you're cutting and a lot of the characters. It's almost like a tone stack, you could say, for that delay sound.
So this is kind of an interesting tie-in. This kind of moves in the direction of where my second choice was. My favorite sounding delay ever is not very useful if you're a working playing out musician, but it was famously the delay that Lanois turned on the Edge to when they were making Unforgettable Fire and then Joshua Tree. It's the Rack Korg SDD-3000.
Okay.
And then they made a pedal version of this 3000 recently.
That's right. Do you have this unit?
I have the rack. I don't have the pedal.
But you have the original unit.
I do. And so I was just kind of checking it out this week because it has this section that's almost like a synth section. It's got the square waves and saw waves, and you can take the delayed signal, and it's only 12-bit, I think. It's really an analog rack piece that has digital delayed chips in it. It's such an analog sounding sort of thick, but you can do this wild modulation to the delay signal. So you get this warm delayed signal. It sounds really real. It sounds really warm, but the thing about it that's the badass that the Edge knew was the preamp section of this delay is like a preamp boost section, almost a gain section that in front of his amps sounded just phenomenal. You can really goose it.
Very cool. And this 3000 looks like it was famously used by Van Halen, Steve Vai, Steve Lukather, in addition to the Edge.
I think those 3000s were the Roland-made SDE-3000 too.
SDE. Okay, so that's the difference.
So I never had one of those, so I can't speak to it. But I was going to pick a rack unit because I love my rack delays.
And I think that rack stuff's all coming back now because all these modelers now are trying to model a lot of those sounds from the 80s. So it doesn't really cost that much more to go out and find some of that stuff out there, use some of those rack things that were really revered back in the day.
I mean, you've done more stuff with plugins and modeling in your life than I have. What do you think the science is? Do you think it's getting close? Do you think it's as good?
I'll quote my friend Mike, who uses he has a real Moog synth.
Yeah.
And then he has the Moog software synth. And he says the Moog software synth sounds amazing until you play the real Moog.
Ah, okay, good. I like that. Recently, famously, the Edge played at the Sphere. And I guess he said, or his guitar tech said that, the Sphere is horrible for amps. You can't have amps up there. It doesn't sound good. So he just brought an Axis box and he did all his crazy giant racks and pedals through that, maybe a couple pedals under the stage.
Yep.
And somebody was like, see, it's gotten so good that even a discerning guy like the Edge, and it's like, yeah, wait until you see him actually tour regular places and see what he brings. You can't model everything, can you?
Even Metallica, I think for a long time now, they've been using modeling because they did a show years ago, I want to say in Antarctica.
Okay.
In a tent, sort of a base camp for scientists, researchers up there.
Okay.
You couldn't bring tube amps. It just wasn't a possibility. So they were kind of in a pickle, and it was okay, we'll bring these Axe effects or whatever it was at the time. I don't know exactly which.
I mean, if you've seen them recently on their tour, they have that stage setup where there's like 10 mics on the stage, 3 drum sets, and they're all running around everywhere. Maybe it makes more sense for that too, just from a using standpoint up there and the way they're playing.
I think from a financial perspective of touring and what it costs to ship things around the world as they do, and also for night-to-night consistency. And then again, I think for what Metallica is, it's a very consistent thing. I wouldn't call Metallica an organic sounding band. I mean, it is organic in a way.
They have their sound.
They
love what they record with the Mesa Boogie Mark II green line, whatever it is, head that they like. But they don't take those on tour with them, right? Or he doesn't.
You kind of have in your head what Metallica sounds like. Yep. It's burned in there.
Yeah.
So for them to have a facsimile, I think it's fine. And I've had friends that have gone to see him on this last tour and said it sounds unbelievable. And I'm sure for the front of house mixer, it's much easier to dial in. For the tech, it's much easier night after night.
Sure.
But on the other hand, if you're Derek Trucks or you're one of those guys, there's a much wider palette that you're expecting as a person coming to see him and hear him.
When you sit down, you're right, and watch a Derek Trucks, Jason Isbell, you're watching these guys play, you're half as excited to see what the 4 or 5 amps and tones they're getting out of them and what guitar they're using with this and with that. It's like you're going to watch a chef sitting in his kitchen. What ingredients is he using? And I feel like there are certain players out there that are really excited about the ingredients they use in the food they cook. You know what I mean? Is I making sense?
Yeah, and there's pluses and minuses to both things, obviously. There's a consistency factor with the digital stuff, and we could talk about this forever, Yeah. But when you go see someone like Jim Campolongo with a Telecaster plugged directly into Fender Princeton with everything on 10, and you're in that same room just feet away, there's something visceral that happens that you're just not going to get that from a modeler. He's reacting to the amp's reacting to him. You can only model so many parameters.
Got it.
It's not infinite.
That's right.
Because you're dealing with memory, I guess.
I kind of feel like you play different when you're playing through an amp too. You know, if you're getting into the subtleties of some of these amazing players, any of the guys, I'm not going to even list, I don't want to leave anybody out, but you plug in a good guitar to a good amp that you can hear because it's behind you on stage, I think you play different, you know?
It's getting better and better. And if you're in an apartment, I totally understand, you know, but I'm not sure, I'd be hard pressed to find anybody that if you had a great guitar, a great amp that's been serviced and is in tip-top shape, next to a modeler copying that thing. Mm-hmm. I don't think people, apples to apples, would choose the modeler.
Okay. That's good. I mean, I don't say this with any disdain for any technology, because I think technologically we're in a great place with instruments. We can do all kinds of cool shit. But yeah, man, the guitar and the amp thing has been my thing since I was 13 years old.
And if you're in the studio, I mean, what's better than plugging your instrument directly in an interface, pulling up a sound and going? So if that's the quickest way to get the creativity, that's fantastic. That's why those things are so great.
Yeah. You want to foster that creativity. You don't want to have to spend time worrying about the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
Do you record a whole record that way? I don't know.
Whatever inspires you, I think. That's the thing a lot of people probably forget too. And obviously you have to factor in all the constraints and parameters that you have at any given time.
That's right.
You know, so for anyone who hasn't, get in front of a speaker, moving some air.
That's great.
Just see what it does to you. See if it moves you. It might, maybe it won't.
I'm putting some money down on it does. It's so badass. It's great.
And I wanted to get back to the delay thing, you know, and a lot of these things maybe cost a little bit more money, especially when you're getting into the older, maybe those analog bucket brigade delays. But I'm going to throw a bone out there for everyone listening.
Okay.
And the Arion SAD-1.
Okay.
So the Arion, the pedals are, you know, not tanks, so the opposite of what a tank
plastic.
would be.
There's a lot of plastic on them.
A lot of plastic.
They sound good, though. They really sound good.
They do sound great. I think it might be a knockoff of that early Boss DM2.
Okay.
It has all those cool bucket brigade chips that you want in there, and they sound fantastic.
They do.
That's the one, and you can find them sometimes for $30. I mean, come on. And they do something cool, and there's one little trick you might want to know is when these were out, 9-volt wasn't really the power supply standard at the time.
Okay.
So even though it is a 9-volt pedal, they run a 9-volt battery. When you plug a modern day 9-volt supply, there's a little mini resistor that's actually cutting it down by 3 volts.
Oh,
so, you know,
6 volt is what it's running on?
The standard was 12.
Yep.
You'd plug in your 12-volt supply, it would cut it down to 9, it would work. So now if you plug in the standard 9, you're only getting 6. So you'll see a lot of these older Arion and the SCH-1 chorus, which is sort of one of the famous chorus ones.
I have one of those. I have it modded by Vertex, I think. And but again, it sounds good. These pedals sound good.
Yeah, they sound great. And if you do that little mod, I think it's just removing a resistor. It's very simple. You get the full fidelity and headroom and range of those things.
One of those guru players out there, Landau, you know, he famously used that Arion chorus forever, still does. That's his chorus sound.
It does one of the best, for a chorus pedal, one of the best faux Leslie's out there. It really does.
That's why I bought it. Yeah, that's exactly
and it has a tone control, so you can really dial in.
That's right. Width and depth is usually what chorus thought about. They didn't think about the rest. Yeah.
So going on to my last one.
Yeah, let's continue with it.
Yeah.
But we digress, as always.
Being that my beef with a lot of these delay pedals is that it does change your bass tone. Once I found out that this was a possibility, this kind of changed the game for me, which is the analog drive-through technology. So TC Electronics, we've talked about them in the past. Their flashback line, very popular. A lot of people use those. The one I went with was the Alter Ego, which essentially is their flashback. I think it might have been designed for a specific merchant when it came out, but it was just their flashback with different cosmetic graphics, and presets were all classic vintage delays. So your Echo Plexes, your Memory Mans, that kind of stuff. And it has the analog drive-through. So finally I was able to have a delay pedal that kept my tone the same and just added those cool delay sounds on top of it.
Which is what you're looking for, right? That's your
exactly.
Standard, so.
It had 3 presets with a tap tempo and a looper, which if you're jamming by yourself, you could spend hours doing that.
Yeah, it totally changes the game if you're home playing with the looper. You can do, again, hours can go by.
Yeah.
It's funny, so I'll give you mine now, my last one too. And before I do it, there's a few that we haven't said that are huge, right? The Echoplex, that's not going to be my last one. You didn't pick that one.
Okay.
The Memory Man, I mean...
Never bonded with it. I always felt like I was missing something, and I tried.
Yep.
But there was something about that warbly chorus repeat that always turned me off. I couldn't get a good tone out of it.
It's funny you say that. So, I went with the Edge's second wife, the Korg delay. He was a Memory Man guy first, and that's when I really sort of liked his delay. But I never liked the pedal that was his go-to, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if I spend some more time with it, because I certainly have some old Electric Harmonix big pedals from the old school back then. The Electric Mistress, which sounds great. I'm sure they sound great, but it wasn't my thing.
It is a bag of chips, though, where inside there's barely anything in there.
You're 100% right. Yeah. They're not selling it by weight. They're selling it by size, right? Yeah. So it turns out neither of us took those two pedals or those two delays and put them in this first talk of delay. But the one that I picked, that's definitely a copy of the Echoplex. It's by Catalinbread, the Epoch Deluxe delay, which is really a copy of the EP3 style Echoplex. And it just sounds really good. Not that expensive. I can say you can buy one of these new, the Epoch Deluxe, or just the Epoch Delay. The difference being the Deluxe has the input analog preamp section of an old tape delay.
And you were talking about that earlier, too. You were talking about using the preamp, and a lot of people did that. I think that's even the EVH thing back in the day.
I was just having a conversation with a buddy of mine about that. The fair warning EVH sound wasn't just as Marshall cranked. It was pumping in through an Echoplex and pumping in through other things as it's going in, right?
Everywhere back in that time where you could get a little bit more gain out of the Marshall, I think people were taking that route. And you have that exotic EP3. Yeah. Which I believe that pedal is just the preamp from the Echoplex.
Yeah. So this is analog and digital. There's no tape in it, obviously, but one of the knobs will get you to a bunch of different modes, and they have a bucket brigade mode, like a roto swirl Leslie mode. They have a Memory Man mode with that little chorusy thing on it. As soon as you said it, I started laughing at it, Yeah. Since I got one 6 years ago, I always go to it. It's always fun to play.
And I think we'd be remiss, Dan. There's one more. I have to do a bonus in here.
Yeah.
The Line 6 DM4.
Oh my God, that changed music, right?
Still is the standard for a lot of people. They had the looper thing in there.
Yeah, I had two buddies of mine that used to play downtown, and they both had one. And it was just amazing, that little function and how easy it was on that pedal still to use. To kind of click it, get your loop going, click on top of it, and go again. And
I know the Kidney Bean put Line 6 on the map, but I think the DM4 solidified Line 6 for sure.
I was just watching something the other day, and there's still plenty of players that want that on their board. Plenty of big-time players that can put any delay on there. Even the original, the green one, whatever. I've never used one, but I've been in the last 3 bands. Somebody in the band had one.
Yeah, so. I had one that was on the board for a very long time, again, for the looping function that I just like to jam with. Mm-hmm. But also was kind of would change the bass tone, and the switches were prone to breaking because the switches, I believe, I guess they were just kind of crappy switches. So I went in there, I opened that thing up, I put normal stomp switches, ran wires to the board from each of the switches. Definitely that upgraded things. And then for the first time ever, I had to get a smaller soldering iron, a weaker with a fine, almost pencil tip. Okay. Because it was the first time I ever modded a surface mount component. So it was the size of it goes on your fingertip, an ant maybe.
So you're ballsier than me. I'm not doing that. I'm not even, I don't work on them like you do anyways, but I would have seen that and just closed that sucker.
Oh man, I bought a magnifying glass. So that's how small the components were. And
just picturing you with like a monocle or one of those head magnifying glass and there I
had it on a stand mount, a magnifying glass. And I remember when I finished that, I can't believe I did it. It was so
Don't try this
surgical.
At home, kids. Don't try this at home. Don't take out your old pedals and do this. I think the other thing is that takes up a lot of real estate on a board. Not that...
And heavy. Yeah. And it was heavy too.
But for those that love it, they love it. It's like...
It has a sound. I think like a lot of the things we're talking about today, it's not just about the repeats. It does something to the overall tone, and it can be really nice.
Nice. Well, there we go. That's our first foray into the world of delay.
Sweet.
And next week, what we are going to do, what we hopefully will enjoy, is we're going to each pick a guitar and go into its effect or its place in sort of music, and maybe it's by a bigger maker of guitars but less well-known or less understood, and I think we'll each kind of throw out the impression we get and see where it takes us. Sound good?
I love this, Dan. I like the idea of we take one of our all-time favorites and we really do a deep dive on why we love it so much.
Yeah.
Maybe our experience with it, our history with it.
Between you and I, we've owned a bunch of them, I'm sure. So.
Yeah. And maybe we turn somebody on to something that they weren't hip to before.
That's right. All right, so I'll talk to you next time, brother.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Guitar Gab, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything guitar. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Watching on YouTube, hit like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Be sure to visit guitargabpodcast.com for all our episodes and exclusive extras. And if you have feedback, topic ideas, questions, or even corrections, drop us a line at feedback@guitargabpodcast.com. Thanks for hanging out with us, and until next time, keep playing.